and I know she ain't either. I just want the truth. I want the truth to be told, no matter which way it is.
And you will feel so much better. We're talking about your family here. So you telling us anything that we're missing, you're going to feel a lot better by telling us the truth.
The only thing that I know is just that I left the house later than what I said.
Did you leave the house with your brother Cody looking like that? Or did you leave the house with your father looking like that? Or your mother? Is that how you left your family?
No.
Nobody else went into that house.
Who left your family like this? If you were the one that's been depressed, you were the one that owes money, you were the one that got into a confrontation with your father, who did this to your family? If you were trying to defend yourself or something else happened, we need to know now.
This man killed his parents and brother over an internet girlfriend he'd never met in person. But that's not even the craziest part of this story. Because while serving life in prison for those murders, he convinced another woman, a married woman at that, to hire a hitman to kill her husband so they could be together. Some people never learn, and Grant Amato is the perfect example. Welcome to grim reality. Most murderers get caught, go to prison, and that's where their story ends. But Grant Amato, he turned his prison cell into a crime headquarters. While serving life for slaughtering his parents and brother, he was already plotting his next murder. This is the jaw-dropping story of a man who destroyed his family for a webcam model he'd never touched, then used a smuggled phone to seduce a married woman who became completely infatuated with him. Together, they planned a murder-for-hire scheme to eliminate her husband so they could finally be together. Because apparently, wiping out one family wasn't enough to satisfy his bloodlust. So buckle up and prepare yourself because we're diving into this twisted double feature. A story so unbelievable it had to happen twice to be real. This is going to be one hell of a ride. In the small, tight-knit community of Chulawota, Florida, the Amato family looked like the picture of normal suburban life. Their house sat on a quiet street, framed by palm trees and well-kept lawns, a home built on years of hard work, discipline, and family values. Chad Amato, the father, was a respected healthcare professional with a no-nonsense attitude and a reputation for being dependable. His wife, Margaret, was warm, caring, and fiercely protective of her two sons. And then there was Cody, the younger brother who seemed to have it all together. And finally, there was Grant. Born into a stable and loving household, Grant Amato never went without food on the table, clothes on his back, or a roof over his head. His parents invested heavily in his future, providing opportunities to study, encouraging his ambitions, and setting him on a path they hoped would lead to success. From the outside, there were no storm clouds, just a boy with every reason to thrive. But inside the Amato family dynamic, subtle cracks were forming, cracks no one could have predicted would one day split wide open. Grant was intelligent, but he wasn't a natural overachiever like Cody. While his younger brother excelled in school and built a career in the medical field with precision and drive, Grant struggled to find the same level of focus. His grades were decent, and he eventually followed his father's footsteps into healthcare, training as a nurse anesthetist. But even as he reached professional milestones, he lacked the discipline and passion that defined Cody's success. The difference between the two brothers didn't go unnoticed. Chad and Margaret loved both their sons, but it was clear Cody was the one who stayed the course, the dependable son who followed the rules. Grant, on the other hand, always seemed to be drifting, chasing distractions that took him further from the path his parents had laid out for him. Friends and acquaintances often described Grant as quiet, sometimes awkward, but capable of being charming when he wanted to be. He was the kind of person who could fade into the background in a group, yet light up when talking about something he was passionate about, often hobbies like gaming, anime, or computers. He wasn't a troublemaker in the traditional sense. There were no stories of bar fights or run-ins with the law in his early years. But there was a certain aimlessness to him, an inability to commit to things long-term. Then came the day that shifted his life's trajectory for good. Grant lost his job at the hospital, not because of budget cuts or downsizing, but because of a deeply troubling incident. He was accused of stealing medication and, more disturbingly, of giving certain drugs to patients in ways that weren't prescribed. According to what would later come to light, Grant allegedly administered sedatives to keep patients quiet during the night shifts, simply so he wouldn't have to deal with them. In the medical field, that's not just a bad decision, it's a felony. But for reasons never fully explained, no charges were filed. Maybe the hospital wanted to avoid the scandal. Maybe they believed quietly letting him go was the safest route. Whatever the case, Grant walked away with his freedom, but without his career. And that career had been the last solid piece of his identity. From that point on, things began to unravel quickly. He was still living at home in his late 20s, watching friends and family move forward, Cody with his thriving job, his girlfriend, and his growing independence, while Grant was sinking into a life defined by screens and solitude. His parents were patient at first, hoping he'd bounce back, but the expectations in the Amato home didn't disappear just because Grant's job did. Chad expected results, Margaret expected honesty, and Cody expected his older brother to hold his own weight. But the more reality pressed in, the more Grant retreated into his private world, one that existed almost entirely online. It was a place where no one judged him for losing his job, no one compared him to Cody, and no one asked what his next step would be. The cracks in his life, once barely noticeable, were widening, and soon they would become the fault lines that tore the entire Amato family apart. So now Grant's unemployed, stuck at home in his late 20s, living in his old bedroom like he's still in high school. He's burned his bridge at the hospital, his reputation in the medical community is toast, and every job application he sends out comes back with silence. Then he gets an idea. It's not a sensible idea like going back to school or getting a retail job to tide him over, no. Grant decides he's going to become a Twitch streamer. He's seen how much money some of these guys make playing video games online, talking to chat, building a fan base. In his head, he can already see it, the sponsorship deals, the subscribers, the attention. And here's the thing, his parents, Chad and Margaret, are actually supportive. Maybe they figure it's better for him to have a project than to keep sulking in his room. They buy him a brand new computer, a top-quality webcam, and all the accessories he'd need to start chasing this new dream. But instead of firing up Twitch and streaming games, Grant does something entirely different. He unwraps the webcam, sets it up, and logs into adult cam sites. If you don't know what a cam girl is, let's just say it's a live streaming setup, but instead of gaming, the show involves a lot less clothing and a lot more flirting. And for Grant, this isn't just entertainment, it's escape. At first, it's just random browsing, different models, different personalities, but then he finds her, Sylvie, a cam model from Bulgaria with long dark hair, striking features, and a voice that drips with flirtation. She knows exactly how to make her clients feel like they're the only person in her world. And for Grant, lonely, aimless, and desperate for validation, it's intoxicating. What starts as casual chats quickly turns into a full-blown fixation. He's logging on every chance he gets, morning, afternoon, middle of the night, waiting for her to appear. When she does, he spends lavishly. Not just a few dollars here and there, but hundreds at a time. Sometimes thousands. The more he spends, the more attention she gives him, and the more convinced he becomes that their connection is real. But real comes at a cost. Soon, his own savings are gone, so he reaches for his parents' credit cards. At first, probably telling himself he'll pay them back. But Sylvie is always there, smiling, saying his name, making him feel special. And when those cards max out, he doesn't stop. He moves on to Cody's credit card, his own younger brother, the one who's been working hard, saving money, building a life. In total, Grant ends up draining $50,000 from Cody without his brother's knowledge. Then he goes back to his father's accounts and pulls an even more staggering sum, $150,000. All of it sent overseas to keep a fantasy alive. At first, the family doesn't notice. A few strange charges here and there could be explained away. But the numbers start stacking up, and soon the Amatos can't ignore it. When they finally confront him, they are horrified, not just by the money, but by where it's going. The idea that their son is funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars to a woman he's never met, who lives on the other side of the world, is incomprehensible. They sit him down for a serious talk. Grant's response? He lies. He says it's not what they think. He insists they're exaggerating. But his story doesn't hold up under the weight of the bank statements in front of them. When the pressure builds and the walls close in, Grant does what he's always done when faced with consequences. He runs. He disappears to his aunt's house, spinning some story to get her sympathy. She has no idea what's really going on, so she lets him stay. But if the Amato house was a place of confrontation, his aunt's home is an open field for his addiction to grow. He starts using her credit cards too, sending more money to Sylvie, digging the hole even deeper. Eventually, his aunt catches on. The unusual charges, the late-night behavior, the secretive attitude, it all becomes too obvious to ignore. She calls Chad and Margaret, and the truth comes out. The confrontation this time is different. There's no yelling, no physical fight. Instead, when they press him about the lies, the theft, the obsession, Grant doesn't argue. He just breaks down and cries. And here's the tragedy. The family still loves him. They're angry, they're betrayed, but they want to believe he can turn things around. So they do what most families in denial do. They give him one more chance. But that chance isn't the end of the problem. It's the start of the final spiral. The tension in the Amato house becomes unbearable. Cody's had his savings wiped out. Chad is missing hundreds of thousands of dollars from his retirement accounts. Margaret is torn between motherly compassion and the growing fear that her eldest son is out of control. Grant promises he'll stop. He swears he won't talk to Sylvie anymore. But promises don't mean much when the addiction isn't just about money. It's about the fantasy, the validation, the feeling of being important to someone. And behind closed doors, Sylvie is still there, smiling at him through the screen. Every dollar he's stolen is gone. His career is in ruins. His family's trust is shattered. And yet, he can't let go. To Grant, walking away from Sylvie would be like walking away from the only person who understands him. Never mind that she's thousands of miles away and their entire relationship is built on money-changing hands. The Amato house becomes a battlefield of unspoken resentments and visible strain. Conversations are short, arguments flare up over the smallest things. The trust that once held the family together is gone, replaced with suspicion and quiet judgment. And for Grant, that atmosphere isn't just uncomfortable, it's threatening. Because if the money is gone, and the family is furious, and the fantasy is slipping, he might lose everything all at once. And that thought, the idea of losing Sylvie, will set in motion the events that turn an already broken home into the scene of one of the most shocking crimes in Florida's history.
All right, Sylvia, look at me. I am outside going to check the mail. And I'm asking you if you can please, pretty please, send me one of your videos. I love it so much when you just send them to me. Yeah, I don't like buying your stuff. It makes me feel weird. Could you please send me one, though?
In a last, desperate attempt to save their son, the Amatos pulled together more than $15,000 to send Grant to an intensive therapy program, something like rehab, but for people who had spiraled into addiction without the drugs or alcohol. It was supposed to be a reset button, a place where the constant noise of online obsessions couldn't reach him. While he was gone, Cody and their parents finally had breathing room. And with that space came the courage to confront what they'd been too afraid to dig into before. They sat at Grant's computer, the one he spent nearly every waking moment on, and began to click through the files, the chat logs, the payments. That's when they found her, Sylvie. She was there in bright, staged photos, in hours of private messages, and in the staggering trail of money transfers that had bled their family dry. And the deeper they looked, the angrier they became. Instead of staying silent, they decided to reach out to her, not in some angry, threatening way, but as parents who had been pushed to the edge. They explained the truth. Their son wasn't who he said he was. He was unemployed, addicted to this fantasy, in treatment, and every cent she'd been paid had been stolen from his own family savings. They thought maybe, just maybe, if she knew the full story, she'd cut him off. But Sylvie wasn't moved. Why would she be? She'd made around $200,000 from Grant's obsession. A sad email from his parents wasn't going to make her close the door on that kind of payday. 2 weeks later, Grant returned home from the program, but things weren't like before. The family had hit their limit. They weren't willing to pretend anymore, and they weren't willing to enable him. So they laid down strict, non-negotiable rules. No internet access on his phone. No late-night computer use, only during the day in full view of the family. No contact with Sylvie, at all. And if he couldn't live with that, there were 2 other options: join the military or leave the house. Grant nodded, saying he understood. But the truth was, the moment those rules were set, the clock started ticking. It didn't take long before he was sneaking around, breaking every agreement. Somehow, despite the restrictions, he managed to get back in touch with Sylvie. When his father found out, the reaction was explosive. The air in the house turned electric with rage and disappointment. Chad Amato didn't just yell, he made it clear that something in him had finally broken. He told Grant to get out. He'd ruined their retirement, he'd destroyed their trust, and worst of all, he'd turned their home into a battlefield of lies and secrets. There was no warmth left in his father's voice, no hint of the patience they'd once had for his excuses, just cold, final words. Get out. And in that moment, whatever fragile thread had been keeping Grant tethered to reality, snapped. And in that moment, something inside Grant Amato fractured. Being told to leave wasn't just about losing a roof over his head. It meant losing his one and only lifeline to Sylvie, the fantasy world he'd built around her, the hours of late-night calls, the belief that she was his future. It also meant facing the full force of reality, his father's scorn, his mother's silence, his brother's disappointment. The shame was suffocating, and the disgust in their eyes felt like a spotlight he couldn't step out of. Even Margaret, who had always defended him, wouldn't look at him the same way anymore. In Grant's mind, there was only one way to make it stop. One way to erase the pain. One way to silence the voices telling him he'd failed. Get rid of the people causing it. It was late January 2019 when he put the plan into action. Investigators believe he came back to the family home with a gun in hand, calm, deliberate, and ready. The first person he encountered was his mother, Margaret. She was sitting at the family computer, back turned, completely unaware that her son had stepped inside. There were no arguments, no warnings, just a single, close-range shot to the back of her head. She never even had time to stand. Grant didn't flee, he didn't panic, he simply waited. He knew Chad would be home soon from work. When the garage door opened and his father stepped inside, the silence of the house must have felt off. But before he could process what was wrong, 2 gunshots tore through the air. One struck him in the head, the other in the chest. But Chad didn't die instantly. Investigators later found smears of blood and partial handprints along the floor, evidence that he tried to crawl away, still clinging to life. But Grant closed the distance and ended it. Then came the final step of the plan. Using his father's phone, Grant sent a short, urgent message to his younger brother, Cody, "Come home right now." Cody didn't hesitate. He was the kind of person who showed up instantly when his family needed him. A decorated Air Force medic, disciplined and dependable, Cody pulled into the driveway within minutes, probably expecting an accident or a medical emergency. The second he stepped through the door, Grant shot him in the head. 3 family members, gone in less than an hour. But murder wasn't the end game. For Grant, the real goal was what came after. If the police believed he'd done it, his life would be over. Jail meant no Sylvie, no more messages, no more fantasy. So he staged the scene. Cody's military background made him the perfect scapegoat. People would believe he knew how to handle a firearm, and perhaps, in some twisted narrative, that he'd snapped and taken the lives of his parents before turning the gun on himself. Grant placed Cody's handgun in his brother's hand, arranging it to look like a suicide. He tried to position the bodies in a way that made it seem like Cody had been the aggressor. Then, methodically, he began wiping down surfaces, trying to remove his own fingerprints from doorknobs, counters, and the weapon itself. Hours passed. He left the house, not to disappear, but to check into a local motel. And there, with his family dead only miles away, he got back online and contacted Sylvie. The fantasy was still alive in his mind, if only for a little longer.
Department on the record line. My name is Shalia.
Hi, my name is... I called a couple hours ago to do a welfare check on a friend of mine. I hadn't heard back anything, but one of my other friends did, and I just wanted to follow up on the person.
Okay, so just so I'm understanding, you called to have a well-being check done on someone. You haven't heard back from anyone, but your friend heard back from someone?
Yes, because we both called and we didn't realize that we had both called, so he heard back a little bit ago, but I did not.
So what did he tell you he heard back?
He heard that they went to our friend's house and there was no answer at the door, and his brother's car was gone.
What's the address?
And they said they don't have the addresses.
Okay, yeah, we still have officers out there. It looks like they haven't made contact with anyone as of yet, but I'll have them give you a phone call back with the outcome.
Okay, I am concerned that something has come upon my friend. I know that his brother struggles with depression and I believe suicidal ideation as well. He mentioned it to me, and I'm very worried.
The discovery of the bodies happened the next morning. Cody had failed to report for duty at the Air Force Base, something completely out of character. Concerned colleagues contacted the family. When they couldn't reach anyone, they called local law enforcement to perform a welfare check. Deputies arrived at the Amato home and stepped into a scene of unimaginable violence. Margaret was slumped in the computer chair. Chad was lying near the front hallway. Cody's body was on the floor with a gun loosely in his hand. At first glance, maybe the murder-suicide theory could have worked, but the crime scene started talking almost immediately. The positioning of Cody's body didn't match how a trained marksman or medic would handle a gun. His arm was unnaturally bent, the weapon angled in a way that made no ballistic sense. More tellingly, ballistics testing showed Cody's firearm hadn't been fired at all. The shots that killed their parents and him came from a different weapon entirely. Inconsistencies kept piling up. Grant quickly rose to the top of the suspect list. He wasn't at the house when deputies arrived, but his story didn't hold up. When located, he appeared calm, even oddly detached, as officers brought him in for questioning. The interrogation was long and methodical. Detectives laid out the evidence piece by piece. He had no alibi for the time of the murders. His DNA was still found on items around the home, despite his attempts to clean up. Surveillance footage placed him near the scene that evening. Financial records showed he had drained accounts and stolen from multiple family members, giving him a clear motive to eliminate the people confronting him about it. But Grant didn't confess. He stuck to vague, emotionless denials, even when shown photographs of the scene. He seemed more concerned with how he was being perceived than with the fact that his entire family was gone. Detectives noted his demeanor. No tears, no anger, no visible grief. Just an almost clinical detachment, like he was watching someone else's story unfold. Back at the Amato home, the forensic team kept finding damning details. The bloody crawl marks from Chad showed there had been time between the shots, meaning Grant would have seen his father still alive and chose to finish the job. The wiped surfaces didn't cover every trace. Partial prints still remained in places Grant overlooked. And perhaps most telling of all, after the murders, his motel room internet history showed logins to the same campsite, the same account, the same woman who had consumed his every waking thought. Within days, the state attorney's office authorized murder charges, 3 counts, 1 for each victim. Grant Amato's arrest was swift. There was no dramatic chase, no last-ditch attempt to flee. Just a man in handcuffs, sitting stone-faced as deputies led him away from the life he'd destroyed. The trial of Grant Amato unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare, every detail a reminder of how far a human being could fall. The courtroom in Seminole County, Florida, was tense from day one. Reporters crowded the benches, cameras lined the back wall, and in the front row sat the few surviving family members and friends, their eyes hollow from grief. The prosecution wasted no time painting a chilling picture. They spoke of a young man who had once been given every opportunity, a stable home, loving parents, a promising career, only to throw it all away for a fantasy life with a woman he had never even met in person. They laid out their narrative with precision, the thousands of dollars drained from his family's accounts, the lies he told, the deepening obsession with a Bulgarian cam model named Sylvie, and finally, the night of January 24, 2019. Piece by piece, prosecutors walked the jury through the evidence. Surveillance footage showed Grant leaving the house in the early hours, then returning hours later. The murder weapon, a 9mm handgun, had been kept in the home. Gunshot residue was found on his hands. His story, they argued, shifted too many times to be the truth. And then there was the most damning detail: no sign of forced entry, no sign of struggle from anyone else. Whoever had killed Chad, Margaret, and Cody had been someone they trusted. Expert witnesses took the stand and added a chilling layer of digital proof to the case. They testified about the precise timeline reconstructed from phone records and device logs, revealing that after the murders, Grant had used his father's fingerprint to access Chad Amato's banking app, moving money or checking accounts in a way only the victim could have done. Furthermore, they showed how Cody Amato's phone had been physically connected to Grant's computer, where investigators found clear evidence of attempts to wipe data and cover tracks. The defense tried to counter with a different image. They painted Grant as a troubled but misunderstood young man, someone spiraling after losing his job and his sense of identity. They suggested that perhaps the murders were the work of an unknown intruder, though they struggled to explain why nothing in the house had been stolen, why the dogs hadn't barked, and why Grant's behavior after the killings seemed strangely calculated. Witnesses testified about the Amato family's desperate attempts to get Grant help before it was too late. Cody's girlfriend described how the family had set boundaries, trying to force Grant to cut ties with Sylvie, trying to get him into treatment. But the more they intervened, the more he withdrew. The prosecution's final blow came in the form of Grant's own words. Police interview recordings were played for the jury, and though he denied pulling the trigger, his tone was flat, eerily detached, even when speaking of his parents' and brother's deaths. After days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just over 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was swift and unforgiving: guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder. Grant Amato stood still as the words were read, his face a mask. No tears, no visible shock, just stillness. The judge handed down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no second chance, no escape from the cell that would now define his world. As he was led away in shackles, the weight of what had been lost filled the room. 3 lives stolen, 1 life wasted, and a family name forever stained with blood. Outside, the Florida sun was blinding. Inside, all that remained was the echo of the gavel and the unshakable truth: some tragedies leave no survivors. Long story short, because honestly, the wildest part of Grant Amato's story isn't just the murders of his family, it's what came next. After being convicted in 2019 and sentenced to life in prison without parole, you'd think that was the end of the nightmare. But 5 years later, the story took a twisted, shocking turn. One so bizarre, it sounds like something from a crime thriller, except it was real. Enter Victoria Goodwin. She's a 49-year-old woman living in Nevada and married to a TV reality star named Aaron Goodwin. If you've ever watched Ghost Adventures, you know Aaron, the guy chasing ghosts, exploring haunted places, and capturing spooky stuff on camera. But behind the scenes, things weren't so perfect in the Goodwin household. Victoria claimed she felt lonely, bored, disconnected from her husband, despite his fame and their public life. Then one day, she watched a documentary series about Grant Amato. She saw the man who'd killed his family over a cam girl, and something about his story spoke to her. Maybe it was the danger, the darkness. Maybe it was the broken man who no one else wanted. Whatever it was, Victoria decided Grant was her new obsession. Despite being married, she wrote him a love letter. And guess what? Grant wrote back. Think about it. Grant had never experienced real, genuine affection without it being paid for. So to receive a letter, an actual emotional connection, even through prison walls, it was a whole new world. At some point, he managed to get a contraband cell phone smuggled into prison, a dangerous and illegal move, but one that opened the floodgates. Over the next several months, Grant and Victoria exchanged hundreds of messages. They shared everything, their feelings, their dreams, their plans. Victoria told Grant she was miserable with Aaron and called him her FH, future ex-husband. She vented constantly about her loneliness and boredom, painting a picture of a marriage hollowed out by distance and disconnection. Aaron had no clue. The man who adored Victoria, who posted happy anniversary messages and photos of them smiling together on Instagram, had no idea his wife was carrying on a secret emotional affair with a convicted murderer hundreds of miles away. As their digital romance deepened, a dark realization took root. If they truly wanted to be together forever, Aaron had to be out of the picture. And here's where things spiral into something far worse than a simple affair. Victoria and Grant hatched a deadly plan, a murder-for-hire scheme. Their idea? Hire a hitman to kill Aaron, then make it look like a robbery gone wrong. That way, Victoria could claim innocence and start a new life with Grant. Victoria agreed to pay $11,515 for the hit, a shocking sum, but one she was willing to spend to be free of her husband. Meanwhile, Aaron was completely oblivious. Still filming episodes of Ghost Adventures in California, he was posting loving anniversary messages. 2 years ago today, I married my best friend. So lucky to have you in my life. And all the while, Victoria was texting Grant, pouring out her nerves and doubts. I'm so anxious, LOL. Can't believe this is really happening. How did it get to this point? Am I a bad person for choosing to end his existence instead of just getting a divorce? Yes, Victoria, you absolutely are. To cover her tracks, Victoria waited until Aaron was out of state, filming, far from Nevada, giving her a perfect alibi if anything happened while he was away. She even sent Grant Aaron's full filming schedule, the dates, locations, the car he'd be driving. And it didn't stop there. Victoria used the Find My app to track Aaron's exact location in real time and pass that information along. She wanted to make sure the hitman had every detail needed to carry out the murder perfectly. Then, Grant forwarded all this intel to the hitman, coordinating times and logistics with chilling precision. Then, late October arrived. Grant messaged a hitman. Aaron Goodwin is asleep right now in the hotel room. I need to know what's going on. Can I get an update? Was it done? But the hitman never responded. Then, everything fell apart. Out of nowhere, a swarm of correctional officers raided Grant's cell, confiscating the secret phone that had allowed him to carry on the entire scheme. Victoria had no idea what was happening. She kept waiting for a message from Grant, unaware that prison staff had uncovered everything. Meanwhile, investigators combed through Grant's phone and found all the evidence: the secret love affair, the messages plotting murder, the financial transactions. And just like that, Victoria Goodwin was arrested. Thankfully, Aaron Goodwin survived. To this day, nobody knows exactly why the murder never happened. Maybe the hitman got cold feet. Maybe the whole thing was a scam from the start. Or maybe the hitman was an undercover cop the entire time. Whatever the reason, Aaron lived and eventually filed for divorce. As for Victoria, she denied everything. Even with hundreds of incriminating text messages laid bare in front of her, she claimed she didn't remember sending them. And that $11,000 she sent? She insisted it was money for buying phones, not hiring a hitman. At this point, you've got to wonder, what is wrong with people? Victoria Goodwin's story didn't end quietly behind bars. After her arrest in March 2024, she faced the weight of the law and the reality of her actions. By April 2025, she agreed to a plea deal, pleading guilty to one felony count of conspiracy to commit murder. In exchange, the charge of solicitation to commit murder was dropped, a small mercy, but no consolation for what she'd done. Then came the sentencing, in June 2025. Victoria received a prison term with a minimum of 36 months and a maximum of 90 months. That's up to 7.5 years behind bars. Her defense lawyer pushed hard for probation, hoping to spare her from prison time. But the judge wasn't buying it. Citing the severity of the crime and the testimony from Aaron Goodwin himself, her estranged husband, who described his ongoing fear for his life, the judge made it clear that her actions carried serious consequences. Meanwhile, Grant Amato, already serving life without parole for the murder of his family, wasn't charged again for this new crime. Prison walls can't fully contain the reach of obsession and manipulation. The public reaction was a mix of disbelief and horror. How could a man locked away for such a brutal crime inspire another? How could a woman, with her whole life ahead of her, fall into the same destructive trap? Their story is a chilling reminder. Obsession knows no boundaries, not even prison walls. It can twist minds, ruin families, and pull innocent lives into a downward spiral of destruction. So here's the truth I want you to take away. Don't be like Grant or Victoria. Don't let obsession or manipulation take hold of your life. Don't let fantasy replace reality, or desperation lead you to darkness. If this story has gripped you, made you think, or even scared you a little, then subscribe to my channel. Because in the world of true crime, knowing the signs, hearing the stories, and understanding the dangers can make all the difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and always keep your reality grounded. Welcome to Grim Reality.